Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 3rd meeting of Glendale's Charter Review Committee. Item number 1 is roll call. Committee members Durham.
Here.
Flower.
Here.
Garibian.
Here.
Hartunian. Karapetian. Oh, Karapetian.
Here.
Menisarian.
Here.
Megardician. Meek.
Here.
Miller. Povolitis.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
And you. Item number 2 is business agenda, report of recording secretary, reposting of the agenda. The agenda for the April 3rd, 2025 Charter Review Committee meeting was posted on March 28th, 2025 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Item number 3 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. The committee may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion. The Charter Review Committee lead may refer the matter to staff for investigation or report. And Chair Flower, we have 1 caller and we have 1 speaker in person.
All right, let's start with the caller.
Okay.
If they're not ready, we can go to the...
Hi, this is Beth Brooks.
Hi, Beth. You have 3 minutes.
I have a question and or recommendation, and it's based upon my experience yesterday at the Planning Committee. I found that the way they ran the committee was really wonderful. When they first opened up, they mentioned the phone number that people could call in. I think that might be a good idea. Maybe if you open the meeting with that as people watch, because when you look at the agenda that sometimes people don't even look at, that's in very small text, you know, a huge box, and people don't always pay attention to that. I thought that was wonderful. You did mention that you can sometimes, you know, respond to speakers. I think that's also wonderful. The City Council doesn't really tend to do that. My other suggestion is if you might, you know, post your agenda, talk to the Glendale News Press or Crescenta Valley Weekly, who I think it would be great if they actually started to get involved with posting the agendas because they have a large following. And also about oral communications, to possibly put it at the end of the meeting, because sometimes after hearing what committees have to say, it triggers something in your mind, and then you have a response or an issue or a question that could come up later, as opposed to, let's say, you know, my calling in now. That's just a suggestion. I thought it might be helpful. And then my other question is, does the Charter Review Committee solicit input from the public? I mean, I'm not 100% sure if you're deciding the recommendations today. I believe you are on the agenda item later, but do you actually solicit opinions or hold focus groups or put out surveys, or is that something the city does, or the city manager or the city council does? And are you the only body that provides input, provides recommendations on the charter, or do you actually also solicit recommendations from other departments in the city? And that's it. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. And Chair, we have 1 speaker in the audience.
Thank you.
Herbert Milano.
Thank you, Chair Flower. I would like to know if I can have 5 minutes. I probably won't need it all, but I just want to have some flexibility.
Okay.
Thank you. Members of the Charter Review Committee, my name is Herbert Milano. I have taken a very deep interest in what you guys are doing, and a deep appreciation for the level of commitment that you've made towards seeing improvements in the city. In one of the first meetings that you've had, I made a strong suggestion that you tap into the experience of Rick Cole, who happens to be, he was mayor of Pasadena. He's currently council member for District Number 2. He was also city manager for about 3 different cities. So he's got the experience of dealing with different types of electorate and different types of forms of government that may be very, very useful. He's not a young man, so he's got decades and decades of experience of what makes cities work and not work. And I wonder if anything happened to that suggestion and who is responsible for following through if somebody does make a suggestion. So maybe one of the committee members needs to make that as a formal request. And the reason is very important because at the last meeting I made a suggestion to look at things in a little bit different way. Why not go out and pick out cities that already have the types of government that you're considering? By districting or no districting, different types of government, whether council mayor or mayor, council type or city manager, city council type of government. Because I have a few cities to suggest for you to look at. The city of Stockton, the city of San Bernardino, the city of Vallejo, and the city of Los Angeles. In the first three cities, irrespective of the type of government, all of these cities have gone bankrupt. So would it make any difference for us to choose what manner of government we're going to have or what type of elections we're going to have if we're not fiscally responsible, we're not able to provide what the public needs? If governance or politics is about who gets what, if there is insufficient government to cover the needs of the citizens, then it calls into question what it is that we should be doing with regard to the charter review. Is it really the manner in which people get elected or the opportunities that people have to get elected, or whether we're going to instill the guardrails that a city needs so it can run properly? The auditors for the state of California, for many years, did a review. The last one was done, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And the position of Glendale with regard to these 430 cities, we had 85% of the cities in California were doing better financially than the city of Glendale. The city of Los Angeles was rated at 5% at the bottom. The city of Glendale, 15% at the bottom. And as you now know about the city of Los Angeles, they are going into some very severe constraints. And the severe constraints comes out of two places. Primarily the burden on pensions and the burden on the payroll. And so many of the documents that I give to you is a way of addressing some of those problems, and they're probably beyond the scope of any single meeting, but I think that they merit for you to take a look at. For every single issue that you find in those documents, there is a case that I personally looked at, evaluated, or pulled the documents, or was present when it occurred. So I know it's a long list. It's probably more for homework for you, for everyone to basically take a look at. But I strongly suggest that there is something else that is significantly important with the way that the city is working. How much time do I have? 1 minute, thank you. So whenever you see the conditions of the roads in Glendale and why it is that the city cannot and does not put the funds and the resources necessary on something that should only be around 2% of the general fund or 3%, and the city doesn't even do that, or where there's parks that is needed, why is it that the city does not have the funds to properly distribute to the departments for the needs that are basic for the city? And the answer lies in the city's financials. The answer lies in the manner in which the city distributes or provides the benefits to employees and the pension system that it has. And if you don't look at that, you're doing a significant disservice with the significant opportunity that you have right now in taking a look at the city charter. And that is my suggestion, that you take a look at those and perhaps you will see the importance of these things for your deliberations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, we have no more speakers.
All right, thank you. Next item is approval of minutes. These are the minutes from March 6th. They were in the packet. If anybody has any changes or corrections? If not,
I so move.
motion to approve, Elizabeth? Is there a second? From Alan? Everybody's in the room, so we can do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, unanimous. All right, item 5, staff comments. No comments? Okay. Item 6, reports, information. There's one item, restricting termed out officials from seeking other office, precluded, an oral report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the last meeting, I understand that the committee asked for some information regarding whether a termed out official for whether it's the mayor to be able to run to council or vice versa, and whether you can impose a term limit. Our office did look at that. We believe it's our opinion that with respect to those sort of limitations on running for office, and I should note that the law in California is such that in order to preclude someone from running for office, such as imposing a term limit, there has to be a legitimate public purpose, that usually the right to run for office, in order for it to be prescribed, there has to be some valid reason, such as in conjunction with term limits in general, the reasons that have been provided for term limits, such as giving other people opportunity to run, such as allowing people to have new perspectives. In the context of a prohibition, and this is what our staff looked at, with respect to a prohibition on somebody from being able to run for an office after they've served in another office, because the two offices of mayor versus the city council have different roles and different duties, there might be some legal impediments to imposing such a rule. I would note that if the committee wanted us to look at or provide some direction, such as a global term limit, so you could run, and this is what is existing in the legislature, for example. They have a rule that says you can serve so many years in one house or the other, or a cumulative cap on both. So if that's something that the committee is interested in, we can certainly conduct a little bit more research in that regard. But I think our opinion is that it would be difficult and challenging to enforce a rule that says if you've been mayor for so many terms, then you cannot then run for city council, and vice versa. Although you could certainly put a cumulative cap, and you could put caps on each one of those offices. So that's our report, such as it is.
Okay.
Happy to provide any more information. And I do apologize, the attorney who worked on this is not here, but that's based on our discussion and our review of the matter. And happy to answer any other questions regarding that issue.
Any questions on this topic? Alan?
Was that mayor, were you talking about an elected mayor, or just as the mayor is now a council
Oh, I
member?
was referring to a directly elected mayor.
Because
Yes.
then it's a
Okay.
separate office.
Yeah,
Thank you.
correct.
Do we want this explored further, or do we have enough that we kind of quiet that issue for now? That's enough for now? Okay. All right.
or like coming year, right? Whatever they did in the past, would that count or it won't count?
I think it has to be
I
perspective.
think it has to be, like the term limits that we have now for council members, 3 terms, it was prospective. So it was prospective from April of 2017.
Is there currently any term limit with the city?
For the city council, yeah, they're limited to 3 terms,
And how long is their term?
4-year terms.
4 years
Right.
up to 3 times?
Yeah.
And if somebody's appointed midterm, that counts?
Only if they've served more than a half of a term. That's under our charter.
Okay. All right. Any further comment? I'm sure it'll come back up as we
Right.
talk about things, but, okay. Let's keep moving then. We're on to number 7, item A, council governance. So we've got 2 questions. I think we're being prompted with some motions in our packet to perhaps make some decisions. We've talked about these issues a lot, so I'm not against trying to figure out where we are on this and landing somewhere. We've got other things to get to. But the 2 questions are whether or not to have a separately elected mayor and what that mayor's duties might be, and then whether or not to recommend going to district-based elections. If so, how many districts? I will note that when I read through the motions that were in the packet, they were kind of treated as discrete, but it seems to me that, well, we need to settle the mayor question first, because if we're going to have a separate elected mayor, that's going to affect the number of districts if we choose to recommend districts. Is there any
Just
Thoughts on
one
that?
quick question on that. Are we limited to how many or how few districts we're allowed?
No, as drafted, and
No.
however we want to proceed,
Okay.
there is an option to say, we recommend you don't put this on the agenda.
Or we could say we want,
the
we
ballot.
could jointly say we want 12 districts if we wanted to.
You're welcome to make that motion.
No, yeah, I'm just saying, all I'm trying to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah,
is that
there-
we are limited to the 6 that were presented on most of the maps.
I don't think that we're limited in terms of the number, other
Okay.
than
I just wanted to check
ultimately
on that.
need an odd number of people voting. Remember, maybe it's just the general law. The general law says it can be 5, 7, or 9, and that's it.
Correct, but by charter,
By
it could be more.
charter,
For
we-
example,
so we-
Pasadena has 7 council districts and the directly elected
Yeah.
mayor. They get 8, but they have a charter requirement that says you have to have 5 affirmative votes to adopt anything. So that's always an option as well.
Okay, that seems a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my preference would be, and I'm open to alternative ideas, that we start with the separately elected mayor question. Alan, you were about to say something, though.
I had a question. So if a motion was approved to appoint or have a directly elected mayor, but say we didn't vote to have districts, I mean, would the directly elected mayor have any bearing on the current, council composition with, the rotating mayor, or is this tied directly to districting?
You can have a separately elected mayor with the remainder of the seats being at large.
You can.
Yeah.
But my question is, okay, this particular motion, is it directed specifically toward a district situation or what we have now as well? Just to understand what we'd be voting for.
As written, it's not, but if it was the sense of the committee that we only think that the council should put a separate elected mayor question on the ballot if they're also jointly going to districts, I think we can make that the recommendation. That's what, it makes it a little hard to parse, because we've talked around all of these issues kind of, I know where I stand kind of overall, but I think everybody's been kind of talking about it in pieces, and how you feel about the districts turns on the mayor, and how you feel about the mayor turns on the districts. I mean, we could do a global motion, but I don't want to, I think it would be helpful if we kind of get a sense of where everybody is overall. I mean, I have a sense of where my overall position lands and how I would have, but I don't want to kick things off. I'd rather hear from everybody else first. And if anybody would like to jump in the pool and tell us, do you have a sense now of where you want to land overall on this combined question of mayors? And
Yeah, Chair, if I may. I think we started out this discussion weeks ago or months ago, acknowledging that they're connected. So I personally have a hard time having a discrete motion on the mayorship and then council districts, because one, they're connected. Two, the notion of a directly elected mayor, the predicate to that, the only reason why we're even considering it is because of districts. So in my mind, not only are they connected, you're putting, the cart's coming before the horse. So that said, I don't think it makes sense to vote on that, or even to, what I think makes sense is we've had one meeting which strictly discussed districts, and we had a free exchange of ideas. We had a second meeting that talked about the mayorship, the last meeting. Maybe this meeting we focus on both of those together and how they're connected, and then hopefully come to a conclusion where we can vote. That would be my inclination.
And that's fine. I'm ready to kind of jump to the end point on that then, if what do you think the final recommendation should be jointly on those two issues?
Well, I'll jump in the water first, I guess. So I think first you have to start with the district issue, and then consider the mayor, because I don't think we even, for me, I can't speak for anyone else. I don't think a directly elected mayor works unless you have districts. There's no need for it. I spent a considerable amount of time reviewing districts. That handout with the green and white rows, that was my attempt at trying to look at the history of the shift. And I have no pride in authorship. It may be wrong. I don't do this for a living, but to the best of my abilities, I believe that information is accurate. I tried to understand the shift from at-large to districts, and because I came back to the question of why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? And I said, okay, well, let me look at other cities that did this, and what problem were they trying to solve, right? So maybe that's a similar problem. And the takeaway was, up until 2002, there was only less than 5% of the cities in the entire state had districts. And the vast majority, and this is just the top 50 based on population, the vast majority, 90+% that shifted in the intervening sort of 20 years, did so because of a CVRA, actual lawsuit, a settlement, or a threat thereof. And that's the one criteria that, even on the city's website, is listed, but that's the one criteria we aren't considering, right? It doesn't apply to us. So then I said, okay, well, I mean, put that aside. What's the other good reason to do it? How does it provide for better governance? And honestly, I couldn't come up with one. I couldn't come up with one that's clear and could be articulated to me. I read some articles that said it's a tossed bag at best, whether there's benefits or drawbacks. And then I said, okay, well, let's assume it is good, and let's move on to the mayorship. And I started to look into, okay, so directly elected mayor, so at least you get somebody, so you're not fenced in, right? If you live in one part of town, you're not limited. You could go to whoever you feel addresses your issues. And then as far as the directly elected mayor goes, the problem I had with that at the end was, I love the fact it's generally elected, great, but for 4 years you have one person setting the agenda, essentially, for the council. Right now it's great, they have to rotate, and everybody gets a shot. And so you're not concentrating the ability to make agendas with one person. So I didn't really see how that was a benefit. Then I went back, so it was back, and I spent probably 20, 30 hours. And then I tried to test some of the claims of, if people vote based on where their candidates live. So, I've been voting for a while, tell by my gray hairs. And I've never considered where anybody lives, honestly. I asked people at 2 different parties. It was hard for me to even figure out where the people live in the last 2 elections. But I know everybody, electability, is the name familiar to you? Do their issues resonate with you? That's why people vote. It has nothing to do with where you live. And so that didn't really work for me. It didn't make sense. So I came away, the more I dug, the more I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't see a real reason that I can articulate. And no one has really been able to articulate it in very clear terms why this is a better move. And then the last thing, I'll just end on this. The one thing, going back to all, the shift, the shift has been, if we felt, we were breaking the law, with the CVRA, then I think that's a very valid reason to switch, because you can't break the law. It's pretty straightforward. But the consultants don't believe that we are in terms of a demographic issue by the law. This is purely just a preference. And no one is hiding that fact. It's been articulated, but that's what I came away from. It's a preference with no clear benefits, but huge downside in terms of concentrating and not allowing people to go and talk to people that they think they need to talk to. If I live in a part of town and the person isn't interested in the things I'm interested in, I want to go to someone who may be interested in it. It's as simple as that. I don't need someone to tell me that I can only go literally within a mile of my house. Because we'd have 7 districts if we went to 7 theoretically, 33,000 people per district. A third of the people typically vote, so it's 10,000 people. It just doesn't make any sense, and I think it really makes it easy for independent expenditures to come in and sway elections. And when I started going down that rabbit hole, I felt really just, I felt it didn't make any sense for us. So I couldn't come up with a good reason to do it. So there you go. I jumped in.
I had a couple comments.
Okay.
Because, as I said, I don't know if this will be helpful or not, because it's like I spent some time going, because it's like, I'm not sure I'm at that threshold kind of like you are, because I think it's a significant change. But it's kind of looking around, because it's like, what's been at least discussed is 6 districts and an at-large mayor. And so my research wasn't particularly helpful, I don't think, but I started looking, going, why the change? It's like we've had a council of 5 people, I think, since the city was probably incorporated, and the city has grown since then. So is there a desire to increase the size of the council to sort of, to a ratio of population? If you look across the country, it's a mixed bag. I think the lowest ratio I saw, and the data is notably older, at least 10 or 15 years, was 1 to 11,000, and some larger cities that even do districts are into the 6 digits in terms of the number of people, or the ratio of council member to individual. And so it's like, in reality, as I look at this, we actually have more decisions out there. Districts is one of them. I don't necessarily think there's an appetite for this, but it's also possible to increase the number of people at large. You could increase to 7 people and leave it as an at-large system, so that the ratio adjusts, just noting that the city goes. I can't find an ideal ratio. I can't find any guidance that kind of says, hey, this is where it is. We're in the United States, we're kind of all over the map on that. But if our desire is to have people a little more connected, maybe reducing that ratio gives people a place to go. That would be the one place where I would say that why I think the elected mayor might be intertwined, because how you come on down on that, if you go to hypothetically, let's say a total of 7 positions, or 6 plus a elected mayor, because if you keep 4-year terms, if you have a council that's large, you're not going to be able to rotate everybody in. And so the rotation system doesn't necessarily work. And so you could go, we could theoretically go at large, 6 people, elected mayor. We don't necessarily have to go 4-year term, by the way. I mean, we could say, it's a 2-year term for the elected mayor, but I don't think that's off the table. I'm really interested to hear from Soaks. As I said, I'm not here to say that one is worse than the other. I mean, you can see it work both ways in cities. I tend to probably lean toward the inclination that I think what we want to set is incentives for people to make decisions for the good of the city. Not necessarily, I'm not sure we want districts, I worry that districts will have people looking for the good of their district and their reelection over what the good of the city is. Because we can pick on Los Angeles a little bit. When you look at what's going on now, they're going to have, as they say, $1 billion deficit that they're going to have to close. And so how do you close that? Whose districts does it impact? Because somewhere in there is going to be pain in closing that gap. And there's some really difficult decisions are going to have to be made. And if you're the person in the district and you get short shrift on something, politically you're in hot water within your own district. I also look at the places, especially the bigger cities that have districts. Those council members seem to individually run their districts to a certain extent. They have discretionary funds to put out within their district. And so when you're starting to set priorities for a city, how do you do this? How do you start prioritizing your safety resources or your road resources? Are you doing it do you do it by the ones that need it the most throughout the city, or do you need to be able to work within each district? I see some downsides to that. But as I said, look, I've seen it work, and it can work good or bad in probably both systems. So I really would like to hear some comments, because let's get to where we need to get to in doing that. But I think our options are wider than just district elected mayor. We could do something different if we think that's good for the governance of the city. And with that, I'll put it back on the floor.
Who would like to speak next? Thank you.
So I think districting makes sense because I think people should have a fair chance of a good representation. And I don't think at-large system provides that chance. Whether the outcome of districting would be better than at-large, that's, I don't know. But then at least people should have a fair chance of representation, and at-large does not allow. So for example, we have, we've been talking about this for a long time. Renters, like people who live below 134, right? Nobody has been ever elected to the council for the past 20 years. So if you're a renter, there are issues that you are more exposed than you're not a renter. Like problems that I can think of, like noise issues. If you live in a big, like apartment complex, a lot of people live in a small space. More people live in a same small space. There's more noise. It affects you. So maybe they want more stronger regulation on noise level, or parking. They need more parking space. They don't want the city to hand out permits unless there is like X number of like parking space for this number of people. If you're a homeowner, those are not really issues that you think about, because you have home, you don't live in an apartment complex. So I think people who are renters, they should have a fair chance of representation, and I think districting allows that chance. Therefore, I think districting is a better system than at large.
Thank you.
So the question I have from Rachel, do you feel that so far renters have not been represented at all in City of Glendale?
That's how I feel.
That's
how I hear and how I feel.
Because one of the things that you mentioned is that they have not had a chance. They've been renters that have ran, but they've not won. So do you feel like if there was districting, they would have won?
So I'm saying we should give them a fair chance. I don't know. So even if we like carve out a district where the like 95% are renters, there could be 5% of a homeowner, and they may get elected. If that happens, there's nothing we can do about it. But at least that district can give them a better chance than at large. I think that's what's important.
The only thing I think that, Rachel, I would tend to agree with you if you had statistics to show that the tenants have not been represented. Because I think there are parks in the South Glendale, there are a lot of facilities in South Glendale. There are great schools, because I was very much in school, involved in schools in South Glendale. They have been spending a lot of bond fees for South Glendale schools. So just to say a blanket statement that the South Glendale people have not been represented in the city, I would like to see more statistics to that effect, as opposed to feelings.
I'm not sure if such a statistic exists, but if you recall the other day, like the previous meeting, someone from South, he said he's a renter. He came here and speak, and I'm a renter. I would like to be represented. I want my opinion to be represented, so I want you to consider districting. I think that could be one example why people want us to change districting.
See, my issue is, if I were, let's say, just for the sake of argument, if a homeowner is elected, the homeowner should be not looked at because he or she is a homeowner, should be elected, as Carl said, because he or she cares about the city. So if someone is being elected that cares about the city, they should also care about renters just as well as anybody else. I mean, I don't think renters are a class. Someone says, if someone is elected as a city council, is not gonna say, well, I'm a homeowner and I'm not gonna pay attention to renters' needs. I don't think that has happened in the past. It's just that maybe the assumption or observation has been that way. I just don't feel that that's been the case. If anything, I think sometimes the homeowners' rights have been foregone because of the renters and doing things in South Glendale. That's how I feel right now. So I don't think it has to do with being a renter or a homeowner. The city council should be thinking about everyone, and they should be acting as such.
I agree with you, but then, you are limited to what you, your experience really dictates or have a huge influence how you see things. If you're not a renter, you're not gonna see or even pay attention to the problems that they face.
So that's why I'm asking you if you have a specific problem that you have faced that the city council has not addressed. I would like to hear that. I mean, yes, I agree with you. So as a renter, then you do have a problem that you feel has not been addressed. I would like to hear that.
I think it's a broader sense. As a proud renter south of the 134, it's just this general sense that you want a election system that's open and that you can have access into jumping in. And the fact that we haven't seen a lot of renters isn't that, there's a system against us or something like that, but that the system might not be as accessible. The thing on the slides that got me really excited was when we talked about elections being cheaper and having to access less people. If you are a renter and you're new to politics and you want to get on the city council, the idea that you have to reach out to 3,000 people instead of 30,000 people because it's your district, you don't have to run, you don't have to raise tons of money in advertisements, that to me is like a much more tangible way of getting more representation and access on the council. And that's something about districts that really excited me.
Chair, if I can. So as a former renter, south of the 134. So I lived in 2 different apartments in the 90s and early 2000s when rent was way less than it is now, and commuted and worked and all that stuff. So a couple things. I looked at the data because the last 2 elections in 22 and 24 had, again, you have to actually do work to figure out if they're a renter or a homeowner. So there was one person who self-described as a renter in both elections, and Karen Kwok, and most of her support came from outside of South Glendale. So and there was people who lived in North Glendale who were on the same ballot, and a lot of one candidate in particular, Varej, a lot of his support came from South Glendale. So what that told me was kind of the obvious. People care about issues. They don't care about where the person lives. So, I think that's an example where renters clearly in South Glendale felt Varej represented their interests more. And if we had districts, they wouldn't be able to vote for him, probably, the way the districts are run. Are proposed to be drawn. So I think it would completely do away with exactly what you want, which is the ability to go to somebody who represent your interests. For sure, it will kind of force you to, someone within a 1 mile radius of where but that doesn't seem to me the reason why we should elect someone, because of where they live. Not in a city this size. If we're talking about a state or an entire country, the geography matters at that scale. But at the scale of the city of Glendale, it just, the data doesn't support it, and it doesn't seem to make any clear reason why you should.
Again, yeah, just to
Wait,
I'm so sorry.
Before we get into more second rounds, I want to make sure everybody's had their first say.
I tend to agree more about the issues than where people live, because there's so many. I don't know why to separate with the categories of who rents and owns. There's so many different issues, economic interests and legal and political issues that people are interested. There are so many homeowners that they don't really even contribute much to the city, and there are people who have been living in so many different areas throughout the years because of, for example, they had a better job different jobs that keep moving. I think the interest of the people for the community, to me, is much larger than putting them in districts where even the interest for them running for the area with less people will be more self-interest would be more, because that's their district, and whatever they're going to do limits versus caring for the issues of the city. That's to me. Again, there are so many renters who are very active in the community. There are so many homeowners who don't do anything for the community. So I don't know if that's the issue. Actually, there are so many renters nowadays. I know people keep complaining about the rent and everything else, but they financially, economically are doing much better than so many homeowners. I don't know if that's the only thing that really matters. And I think the interest of the people running should be the interest for everyone. And the issues, like you said, that people from south of Glendale may vote for someone who lives in the north side but cares for them and brings up the issues that these people really need to be heard for. In terms of the districting, I think I'm going with that. In terms of the mayor, maybe, but well, we can maybe decide, but I think that's what my inclination is at this point. So I think it's the interest of the people, what the issues they care for the larger than specific 10 or 20,000 or 5,000 people. At least to me, it limits their interest. And the people who are going to vote for them, it limits them too, because it has more interest for their specific smaller community than the city at large. That's what I think.
Thank you. Annie and Stephen, I don't think we've heard from you, and Alan as well on this issue.
I think I started in this committee as in favor of districts. I've tried to open up my mind and see different ways we could do these things. I've heard lots of comments about people south of the 134 not getting elected, which is why I brought up we could have two districts, one north and one south. We could recommend, I guess we can't do, but we could recommend all these sort of things in order to encourage people from south of the 134, who live south of the 134, to run for office. Right now, I think I'm on the fence. I could go with at-large, but I would want to expand our city council. I think as it is right now, I think it's not functioning well. I think it should be expanded to a total of 7 on the dais. We could have an elected mayor or a non-elected mayor. If we have 7 on the council, let's go. I would be fine with an elected mayor. I do think 4 years is a bit too much. I prefer the rotation. So if we get to 7, because I do believe we need an odd number on the council, that then would be a rotating mayor system. As you commented, not everyone would get to be mayor.
Fair point.
Yeah, you're
But I'll
that
take
other
credit.
guy.
Sure.
So, but I don't think that's a big deal, that not everyone would get to be mayor on their first term. So I think I'm still open to at-large or council districts. I can see a council district, if we did divide it up, it has nothing to do with the voter rights, the CVR, because we are so blended in the city at large. I went to 5 or 6 of the consultants' meetings just to hear what other people were saying. And, you know, we don't really have a district that anybody has a predominance in, any race or things. What we have is a very blended city, which I'm very grateful for. And I want to see our council and our people running for council who care about the city. As far as I'm aware, our council is actually part-time. They're not being paid for a full year salary, like, you know, $150,000, $200,000 a year. And the city is run by the city manager. And I thought the city manager is who creates the agendas. The council can change and adjust them, but they don't create the agendas for it. So I would say, if we go to districts, I would prefer to have 6 districts and an elected mayor, or 7 districts and a non-elected mayor. Otherwise, I would go with 3 districts, north and south. And
3
this
districts, north
really
and-
upset things.
Chair Flower, we have 2 speakers on the line.
Okay, I'm going to go around the table first. Thank you. Annie or Alan? Alan,
I'll
I
go.
think she's ceding the floor to you for the moment.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You know, I've followed the districting arguments at City Council. The City Council split basically 3-2 at this point, I think, in terms of going to districts. And I attended 3 of the outreach meetings and presentations by the demographer retained by the city, heard all the presentations at City Council. So I've thought about it a long time, and I think for a city the size and composition in terms of population of Glendale, I don't necessarily believe going to districts is going to be advantageous, and I'm afraid that there could be unanticipated downsides to it. The thing that I've repeatedly said that I like about the at-large system is I've got 5, or if the council's expanded, more representatives I can go to with my issues. And, you know, currently, I don't find that my stance on issues coincides with the current council member who lives in my district. So again, I would feel disenfranchised if we went to districts. It's very possible. And the other thing I don't think is that good about districts is the size of the city. You know, 6 districts would be fairly small. I'm afraid that it could be very divisive in terms of the politics involved in who gets elected in particular districts, and there might not be as much concern for city issues at large that affect, you know, the entire city and its future as there would be in the current system. So, you know, like some of the other speakers, you know, I'm not definitely convinced that going to districts would be an improvement or an advantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm for districting. A few reasons. So in my line of work, I work with the most vulnerable in cities, and the most vulnerable you'll never really see at council meetings or commission meetings, because they're either working multiple jobs or just don't know the system or don't trust the system. So they don't show up to these things. So having a district, having a person that lives within their district, I think is very important for them. And it'll be easier for them to voice themselves. Because if you live next to your neighbor, it's easier, you feel more comfortable. Whereas coming here, speaking on people sitting up way above you. So I think that's why it's important. It's more so the lived experience of the area rather than renter homeowner. Although South Glendale still has more vulnerable people renting than living in homes. So your lived experience as a homeowner is completely different from ours as renters. And like I work for the city of Pasadena in the planning department, and it's districted. So I've seen firsthand how districting helps the most vulnerable come out. So this is why I think we should give it a chance here. And the point is that we hope whoever gets elected isn't just worried about their district. They're worried about their district, but also the city as a whole. That's the whole point of electing these people, because otherwise, like, even if we have 7 members at large, they can still be very picky about items that they are only concerned about, and not so much what the city should look into. So I'm for it.
Thank you. cards on the table, I'll start with where I'm at. I'm in favor of 7 positions on the council, 6 at large, and a separate elected mayor. How I got there is, I very much agree with what Stephen was saying here, that it's a good idea to expand the size of the council for a couple different reasons. One, you give more people opportunity to have a voice in the council. Now, 2 seats out of a city of 190,000 people isn't that many more voices, but it is more voices. But more importantly, from what I've seen in working with councils of different sizes in different cities, is having more votes, more people voting on the decision, makes each vote a little bit less critical. It takes down the temperature for that one person or for the council as a whole. It also makes the most disruptive voice on the council a little quieter, because now they're one of 7, not one of 5. And this is not a critique of anybody on the council here in Glendale. This is just based on my experience working in other cities. It's amazing what one person out of 5 can do. And one person out of 7 is a little bit more muted. There's a little bit more ability for the remaining 6 to stand in solidarity against anybody who's acting out. So just in terms of, just organizational cohesion, I think 7 provides a greater degree of stability and reasonable decision-making. Now, if you expand the council, however, without districts, and my worry is that even if we don't have racially polarized voting, or polarized voting based on renting or not, I'm less concerned about who you're voting for than how people are governing. And if you expand the council, you actually run the risk down the road of just exacerbating any sort of polarization. At-large systems can be captured by a significant plurality to the extent that other groups don't get any vote, regardless of race or not any specific category that may or may not be an issue here. But if you're going to expand the council, you run and keep it at large, I think you're running the risk of further exacerbating any problem that might be there now or could come up in the future. Demographics will shift. They have shifted here dramatically in the lifetime of this city. So they're going to shift again. So, like I said, I think it's also about how people govern. I think that having people who do have different lived experiences in different part of the cities will have different perspectives. I think that there is a concern that has been voiced here and elsewhere about the parity and the level of services that are being delivered. Elizabeth, you brought up the schools. Great example. The schools in Glendale are great. It's why my family moved here. They're districted. When this issue came up previously and was on the ballot, I was not in favor of districts for the city, because I have seen ward politics play themselves out in ways which I thought were detrimental. I'll let you go. I'll let everybody else talk. Okay. But when it came up to the school district, I said, no, that makes sense, because you live near your neighborhood school. You want your neighborhood school to be good, and having geographic representation to a service that's delivered throughout your jurisdiction makes it provides a mechanism of accountability to make sure that services are being delivered with some degree of parity. Now, we're not a school district. We do lots of different things. That actually goes back to my first point, why I think a larger council makes sense. We may not be in the top 20 in terms of size, but there's a lot of cities ahead of us in size that aren't as complex as Glendale. We're a full-service city. Police, fire, we have our own municipal electric and water. Most cities don't have that. We have more employees than some of these other cities, I'm sure. And that level of complexity, I think, warrants more people who can devote time to the city's issues. There's no way that 5 people can stay on top of all of that. And if you have 7 people, that maybe they can kind of, by agreement, by subcommittee, spend more time focused on things. You know, I know the city immediately behind us on this list fairly well, Rancho Cucamonga. It's a great city, has grown explosively. They contract for everything. They can't, and so it's just different. They don't run a power company. Oh, they have a small, but it's just different. So at that point, you know, I think the geographic representation, it matters. I think expanding the size of the council is warranted. And so that leads me to decide, you know, to the point of how many. I think 9 gets too big. I think Pasadena's, I don't think it really works. I lived in Altadena for 13 years before moving here, and so saw them up close. So I land at 7, and 7 on the council as a whole, with six districts and a separate elected mayor, and that's where I come out. Now, Elizabeth, I promise I'll get back to you.
The schools, since I was involved with the schools for many, many years, I would actually ask us to look at the scores, the performance of the schools, and the ranking of the schools and the test scores before the districting and after districting. See if districting really helped our schools. That would be really very, very eye-opening, I think, for us too.
I take your point. I moved to be in the CV high catchment area specifically. Literally did. So, you know, there were differences. But even back then, before they were districted, I did notice at the school board, they each had a responsibility area. Right. So they were assigned, essentially, you're here to speak for those people. Now, do we want to do something like that and try to hold people accountable for that on the council? I don't know if it really works. And I don't know how it necessarily worked in practice. I wasn't observing the school board that closely back then, so. Please.
I do, but I think you might have a couple callers and maybe a speaker
You wanna go-
card that maybe we ought to hear from before maybe we conclude the discussion.
Fair point, well made. Okay. Bring on the speakers.
All right, Beth Brooks, you have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hi, Beth. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything. Hello? I'd
Hi,
like
Beth.
to call
You
back
are
again.
live. Can you hear us? Okay. Hello, Alan. You are live. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alan Dish. I'm also having the issue, I think, with that Ms. Brooks also had. I do not hear you, but I hope you hear me. So my name's Alan. Thank you very much. I am calling to voice my sincere gratitude, first of all, for this body meeting. Secondly, I have attended, like Mr. Alan Durham, and others, of course, some of the meetings that happened at City Hall about districting. I am, of course, still skeptical, if that's okay, about districting. Why? Because there are certain issues today that I think can only be solved from a larger perspective. Of course, local democracy is wonderful when it works, but for it to function smoothly, you need things like where does electricity come from, water, education, and so on. So that's why I think that whatever happens, districting that will not necessarily solve the problem. Sorry, I don't want to go more in this direction. Let me just also conclude, if that's okay, with a historical note about South Glendale, which before it was South Glendale, it was Tropico, and the city of Tropico, it's nice to read on their Wikipedia about these differences. For example, I quote from Wikipedia. It says, in 1939, the Tropico District threatened to secede from Glendale and seek annexation by Los Angeles if requests for community improvements were not addressed, end of quote. So, of course, this is unimaginable today, like to want to become part of Los Angeles with all the problems they're having. But you see, there is a certain truth to this idea of South Glendale having been at a certain, you could say, disadvantage, no? To the north, it's not only Glendale, of course, it's in other places in LA and so on. That's all I wanted to say. And I would love to attend in person next time. Greetings again. And I hope Ms. Brooks calls back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Has Ms. Brooks called back?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello, Beth Brooks. Can you hear us?
I'm going to speak even if you can't hear me. Can you hear me? This is ridiculous.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Beth Brooks. No.
All right.
Is that it? I mean, she may call back, but is that it? Okay. Please.
Hi, this is Beth Brooks. I'm kind of flabbergasted at some of the things I heard and very heartened at others. Number one, I'm flabbergasted because our state elections are by district. And then the man who talked about how well the school districts work would be the same argument for voting districts. And the people talking about renters, I come every week to the city council and complain that we are not getting assistance from the city council. We are definitely a class of people. We are not just economically, but in terms of power. Because even if a homeowner is having difficulty, they have equity in their home. It's not the same situation. How many renters have people talked to? One woman wanted statistics. I'm in shock. Did you ever go to the Glendale Tenants Union? I have. Those people, most of whom speak Spanish, don't vote, and they told me they don't vote because they don't feel represented. One feels represented if one has an investment in their neighborhood. It's all local. Everything is local. And assuming that people won't care about the big issues because you would go to a district, I will tell you the opposite. I think the city council, who doesn't have a renters commission, who voted down right to council, who doesn't have assistance for renters, had a program for 1 year and gave some people $200 and stopped it, but has money to study whether they should make artwork in Montrose inclusive. We are not represented. We are definitely a class of people. And you can see that we're not represented by the decisions on the city council. I mean, let's be honest. Doesn't the Armenian community, aren't they happy that they are represented on the council? Why shouldn't renters feel that they're represented on the council? People need to see themselves. They really do. They need to feel that they're heard. We are not heard. You need districts. This doesn't even make sense to me. And you should at least try it. Why wouldn't you try it? And also the woman who worked for Pasadena. Pasadena is working very, very well. Incredibly well. And especially for renters as soon as they enlarge their city council, they have a renters commission, they have a lot of things where people feel represented. Renters are not represented. Good hearts don't make you represent anybody. And I say that because I see the actions of the city council. And I see how they don't listen to me every single week. So you know what? You want statistics? Go out and talk to renters. Go to a Glendale Tenants Union meeting. Email them. Talk to people. Because you're not talking to people. You're making assumptions based on fantasy.
Thank you, Beth. That's 3
You
minutes.
want to talk to somebody? Talk to me.
Thank you very much.
Members of the committee, my name is Herbert Molano. I've lived in Glendale for about 38 years. And I can tell you, as a property owner and as a landlord, that the current system that we have is not working. It is not working for about half the population. And the reason why it doesn't work is because very often those individuals who run for city council are looking at running for the assembly or looking for running for another office. 3 of our current council members have done so. And whenever you're looking for votes, you're going to be looking to the votes of the districts that have the votes, meaning North Glendale, because they are not getting those votes from South Glendale. So what are some of the deficiencies that we have in the city? Well, roads that have not been updated, fixed, reworked in more than 50 years. The number of potholes are pervasive. It is in the documents, in the city's financial statements, in the statistical section. Parks. We have 28,000 people in recreational planning area 10. Zero parkland, 0 neighborhood parks. It's stated there in the report, in the planning report. When the city wants to build and it needs money, it uses hotels as a way of really tapping into money very quickly. Where are all the hotels? Primarily South Glendale. The one time that I did try to put one in that actually was successful in North Brand, it had significant community pushback. So they do it in South Glendale. So we got all the traffic. And then we have the raised utility fees. You know, what, 28 cents per kilowatt hour, it used to be around 18 cents. And I watched a lady in Ralph's nearby trying to figure out how to save $1.50 on her blueberries. And I figure, how does this lady cope with her electric bill now that it's gone up by roughly 40%? These council members seriously are not caring about the individuals who need it, and I think for that reason alone, it should be done. Even though I would probably have to pay the penalty of individuals who will be looking for, to push for rent control. But the system that we have is not working. I have appealed for the city to do a quality of life indicators, as it is done in other cities. A report at the end of every year, how are we doing? How are we serving the community? What are the problems that we have with drugs, with access to parkland? All of these key measures that are truly necessary. They don't care. They simply don't care. It doesn't move forward. South Glendale is the only time it is in the interest of council members if there is a development taking place. That's the unfortunate part. I would prefer not to have districts, but I haven't seen anything to really work that will open up the eyes of these individuals. Thank you.
Back to you, sir.
Just a couple comments. I think someone mentioned in a prior meeting that rents in Glendale aren't exactly inexpensive. I think we wish that maybe that they were at times. And I know the affordable housing issue is definitely something that's of concern and something that I think is of concern to a whole community. But I also suspect that there are renters of means, if you will, that if they have the desire to run for council, certainly could. And that the way our voting goes, okay, now going through thousands of pages of data is not my expertise, especially when I don't have a tool to help mine it. But at least someone else who maybe looked at it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I looked across the voting within the city from the election information that were provided, we seem to have a turnout of about 30%. And that turnout seems to be consistent across the precincts. It's not like North Glendale is different. At least, as I said, I know you're shaking your head, but when I was looking at the district data, just kind of, and it said, and I can't tell you where the districts are because I don't know the district numbers to the names. But it's, yeah, the precincts. So as I was looking at all the precinct data, the turnout seemed to be roughly 30% across the board. It didn't seem to matter where the district is. So we seem to have engagement, but not necessarily there. I guess my other concern is, I don't want to make this feel like it's a renter versus owner issue, because I think there are other issues in the city. The rent, the housing stability, the affordable housing, the ability of people to look for housing. I don't want to make light of that because that's something that really needs to be addressed by the city. It needs to be addressed by the state. It needs to be addressed in a lot of places. But I don't know the district. It's kind of like we're looking at this and it's like, what do they say? If your tool is a hammer, everything's a nail. And I think we need to kind of look at that. If we're talking about barriers to entry, to being able to run a campaign, and they seem to be formidable, is a district the only solution to that particular issue? Because, as I said, I don't want to make light of it, but it's like the issues will also change. And when I think communities, there are other communities within Glendale. As I said, I don't want this to be a rent, non-rent discussion, because I think there's other communities in Glendale. We have other constituencies. We have a diverse community. As I said, when I look at the report and go, you can't draw a district with a geographic center with the diversity that lives in Glendale, I thought that was a good thing. I really thought that was a good thing. We wanted to have an integrated community as opposed to neighborhoods where, there's a, I don't know, if you look at New York at the turn of the century, as people would immigrate, they would tend to live in the same areas. And so you can find a little Italy and, a little this and a little that. And you look at Glendale and we're pulled together. And I don't want to see us tear ourselves apart. There seems to be a lot to that. But I also think there's other communities that might want to be heard, and that might not always be geographic based. And even if for a moment, I'll tiptoe into the rental thing. We South Glendale obviously has a lot of rental units and a lot of people renting, but there are other segments of this community that also have rental units. If we go over to West Glendale toward the Burbank border, you have that. If you go up into Montrose, you have that. So I think there are other people who may have concerns. And I'm not going to tell you that I would say no districts, never, ever, anywhere or any time. I think there may be a time and place for things. When you look at the state, the geography, the complexity of state issues, there's really not a way to do this without representing on some kind of geographic basis, or if you look at the United States. But we're not that big of a community. And as I said, the one thing that I look at this community, I want to see what we can do to pull ourselves together and to be able to work on issues together than to try and push ourselves apart. And I can look at LA and responses to disasters and who's on the news. Now I'll get in trouble because I don't watch every newscast. But it's like, I don't remember seeing the president of the LA City Council saying much about the fires. I do remember seeing the district person there talking about the fires and how they're handling their district. But should we have something like that in Glendale? And I pray we don't. Been around for a couple of disasters, but it's one of those things where you want to really see the city pull together, and you want to see a council pull together. I like the idea of a larger council. I don't know if a larger council, makes things more divisive, but I said I think there's
less divisive.
Well, make them less divisive, but at an at-large system, if you have more voices, I think the same would apply. That you soften some of the extreme voices, you try to build things toward consensus, and to pull things together. And as I said, I'm just looking also going, it's like going, if something were different, then I might have a very different opinion. It's kind of like going back that if we're violating the California Voters' Rights Act, then I think the answer becomes relatively simple. We need to do something. If we have something that's divisive or not working, then we do that. I guess we can argue whether or not it's working, but we elected the folks that are there. And I think no matter what political system you have, the trick is to try to get good people in that office. That's I think the challenge. All right, with that, I will toss it back to somebody else to.
Just a couple of points in response. One, I think comparing us to LA in the context of the fires, I don't see that as a particularly apt comparison. I don't think any comparison to LA and the way they function is an apt comparison. We're not LA. We are, like I said, a full-service city with a lot going on, though. Considering our size, we're I think punching above our weight. Again, I'll just restate my concern. If you enlarge the council, and people can still win a seat with 30% of the vote, that means the same block can keep just winning seats with 30% of the vote in an at-large system. And it's less likely with districting.
And I guess I'd hope that might open up the ability for other communities to also have a voice that might be geographically dispersed throughout the community, because then they might find their voice.
But
I mean, I don't want to say 30% voter turnout is necessarily a good thing either. You know, you'd like to see.
I'm talking about 30% of the total votes cast, not the turnout.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
saying
it's
like it's a very small. When you have an at-large system, you don't need to come close to 50% to get on the council.
No, because they get. Yeah, I get the. Okay, I understand.
So and that's how it is historically disenfranchised racial minorities. And I'm not saying we have that issue, because they've done the study and we don't have racially polarized voting. But you could still have a block of people with similar interests, whether it's home ownership or people living in a certain area of the city, who could, by virtue of just enough votes, take a lot of seats on the council, whether it's 3 out of 5 or 4 or 5 out of 7. And districts makes that less likely. Nothing's going to guarantee an outcome. That's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Chair, if I may.
In a moment. I just worry that, if you have that potential, as the city grows more complex, you could have a demographic shift where suddenly it is a racial polarized group that is able to capture the council in an at-large system. And it does make it harder for other groups to be represented. But in the absence of that right now, I think geography is an important factor, making sure that people are interested living in different parts of the city are represented on the council. There you go. That's the closest thing I can do to a mic drop. Paul, you're up.
How do you follow a mic drop? The one, I do agree with you, Chair, that if you had more people on council, you would diffuse any bad actors, for lack of a better term, right? So I don't necessarily see the argument of we are a complex city, we're punching above our weight. Those facts may be true. We have our own power, thankfully. But I don't want the city council managing those things. I want professional managers managing those things on a day-to-day basis. So I don't see that connection there. Back to you.
Response on that? How many hours did you say you spent on this?
About 20, 30.
Yeah. These are 2 questions without looking at financial information on how to run a power company or looking at solid waste contracts.
Yeah,
I'm just saying 20, 30 hours on one question, whereas take that for every single question, that's a lot of work.
No, but that's
somebody.
why you need the person running the Department of Water and Power to be steeped in this, and the city manager to be steeped in this, and to come with a recommendation. And the people who are making that decision ultimately need to rely and ask prudent questions, but they should not be subject matter experts.
I'm not saying they should be, but it takes time to even just learn enough to answer a policy question.
Now, the other point to keep in mind is this is an issue. This is a very consequential issue, an issue that is baked into the charter that shouldn't be reviewed on an annual basis or even maybe every decade if you're lucky. So I spent 20 hours on this because I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing, and I have to get smart.
None of us do.
And 2, it's consequential, and I know it's something I'm not going to do every day, not going to do every year, God willing. I mean, I don't know. So I don't really think we need more people because we're more complex. Whenever you add people to any process, productivity always goes down to begin with. Sometimes it gets up back to but ask any organizational behavior person, they'll tell you, you add more people to a problem, in the beginning, for sure, it's going to get worse. May get better, no guarantee. But again, getting back to what problem are we trying to solve? We're not trying to solve the obvious, which is a voting issue. So that's out. What are we trying to solve? All the cities that have shifted since 2002 have shifted not because they were solving a problem. They've shifted because of either a lawsuit or a threat of a lawsuit.
Okay, but that's 2002.
I'm-
There's plenty on this list that didn't.
There was only, I think, less than 20 up until that point in the entire state of 480 some, less than 5%. So 95% of the cities were general at large. And the only reason why they shifted was because of CVRA, lawsuit, settlement, threat of lawsuit. If it worked for everybody, I mean, I would have seen a pattern of shifting because it's a better form of government. But I haven't seen, so I get back to what problem are we solving?
I don't know if it's the cities that had done it before the CVRA did it because, well, very local reasons in some cases for smaller cities that aren't on this list. But the bigger cities, is because you get to a certain size or level of
Well,
complexity.
yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, the average city that did it prior to CVRA was at least 2 times the size of Glendale in terms of geography.
Well, we have.
I mean, it was. I've done the analysis.
Well, I'm
Trust me.
saying geography. There's geography and there's population. But I mean, comparators are things like Pasadena, which is smaller than us, but was probably bigger at that time.
But the vast majority are bigger not only geographically but population-wise.
Yeah. Please.
For those that prefer the at-large, and I keep hearing it's been working, what's been working? Like, can you explain what that means?
So, yeah, I'll jump in. When I say it's been working, I'm neutral. What I'm saying is, what problem does this solution solve? Districts, this solution being districts. That's what I'm having a tough time understanding. I'm not saying that at-large is perfect. No system of government is perfect. Everyone that I can think of has a benefit and a drawback. The question is, which ones do you choose?
Classically conservative, small c. Yeah. Don't rock the boat if there's not a good reason to.
Well, I mean,
No,
it's a Chesterton fence sort of situation. It's like, why is this fence out in the middle of the woods? Some guy decides to take down the fence. He doesn't know why the fence was put there to begin with, but he just takes it down because he figures it's going to be okay. I mean, I don't know if this is the perfect form of government. In fact, I'm probably going to say it's not, because I don't know what the perfect form of government is.
It's the best,
All
we
I,
got.
all I can say is I know the reasons why cities have changed. I can see that. I understand that.
I object to the generalization there, that you can see. I mean, again, if I want to just walk away from the CVRA question because it's not at play. And so, like, yes, all these cities you're saying have done it because of the CVRA, and I grant you, they didn't have a choice. But that's not the only reason cities do it, and there's a reason that it keeps bubbling up in Glendale.
I'm not making the statement that is the only reason. I'm
Okay.
saying that
Yeah.
is almost the only reason for the last 20 years. And prior to that, there was less than 5% of cities that had it. Those are facts. They're not my opinion.
I can't.
She had her hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You got to do that.
I just want to point out that, one of the things that the second caller who keeps jumping, one of the things that she said was really resonate with me. She said something to the effect that it's really important to see someone like you on the council. And I kept thinking about that word. And, as you can, I think everybody here, it's fair to say that we are really interested in politics and participation is important. And to me, the first time that I thought about participation in politics was when I was in Korea. At the beginning, I told you guys that I'm originally from Korea. I came here to go to school. And back then, when I was in Korea, it was much more conservative. I didn't see any female politician in Congress. It was all male. So to me, it was even unfathomable that a woman can participate in politics, right? The first time that I saw a woman in politics was on the news. That person was Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State that Bill Clinton appointed. That was a cultural shock to me. A woman can serve at the government? Is that even a possible thing? So I was a very young age, but still I so clearly remember that day. So I was in Korea. I did not know I was going to come to the States, and But the fact that you see someone like you on the governing body has a very profound effect on you psychologically. So if you see your neighbor, as opposed to people live on the other side of town, serving at the council member, you'll have an effect on you that you'll be more interested in what the city does, and you may reach out to that person, hey, I have this issue, you live next door in your next building, don't you have this problem too? It just encourage people to participate more, and I think that's hard to measure, but I think it's a very positive measure, positive thing. So I think it's important. And to that end, I think district is better than at large. And another thing that I want to touch upon is that I agree with Carl said. I don't want this discussion to be like homeowner versus renter. That's not right. But as Chair mentioned, where you live has a really big impact on you. So if we do not want to make a discussion as a homeowner versus renter, we can have condo owners. They're homeowners. They own condo, but they live in a building where a lot of people live there versus single family homeowners, right? So we all have utility bill issues. It doesn't matter where you live. You need to pay for your electricity, and then if you have an EV, you need to charge your car. And I think I mentioned this before at a prior meeting. If you own a single family home, there are various ways for you to lower your bill. But if you live in a condo with a lot of people live together, it's a lot harder for you because the city council hasn't done anything to help those people to lower their bills. So I think that's another, this also shows you where you live kind of have a big influence on how you see things, and therefore I think districting is a better system than an out at large.
Brian, get your hand up. Thank you.
I'm learning the system.
Everybody look at Brian. He's the example.
You guys have been great. No, I love statistics as much as the next person, but I kind of struggle to think what the evidence would look like on a table or a chart that would be like, oh, at large is not working. We have to fix this. Or to switch the thinking, if we started out with districts, what you would see to be like, we got to get to at large. That's the much better way to go. And so for me, it comes down to a lot of intangibles. It's the pros I saw on that slide that really resonated with me that first day. It's more accessible government, cheaper elections, smaller people you have to talk to. I think Ani put it really well with what I heard was I kind of see at-large government as great for political savvy people. I can study 5 elections. I can go and reach out to 5 different people. But I see districts as kind of better for your average voter. And I think that's kind of what I'm voicing with renter representation. Not that I want to see a rental check from the council member to prove they're a renter, but understanding a kind of, low information voter, someone who's getting involved in politics and having that accessibility means a lot. I think a funny example I kept running into is when I tell my friends what I'm doing here on the council and this issue, a lot of people think that's the way it works. Districts, mayor, a lot of people are surprised to even hear at large as a thing. And I just think there's something kind of nice in that simplicity. There's a representation and access and easy understood. And I know it's not a great reason to appeal to the political dummies and be it's a simple system, but yeah, it's just kind of something that jumped out to me as oh, this is how people think the system works. It's how it works all over California. And it might be something that is nice for the people that we want to get more involved in politics, to have one district person to reach out to. So at large might be better in these cases for people that attend council meetings, everything like that. But for a lot of the ambitions we talk about, representation, getting people involved, districts resonates a lot more with me.
So you're saying that it better aligns with people's current expectations anyway.
Yeah, I have to teach people what at-large elections are, and I'm getting tired of doing it.
People don't understand.
People are like, I thought you had a mayor.
But Brian and Rachel, wouldn't it be better to have 5 people or 7 people to go to instead of just 1?
To me, it resonates.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, really quick. I understand. I understand that there's more voices, but because it's elected by the same at-large electorate, to me, it's you kind of just did it. You kind of ran it back 5 times. There's something about districts of you might get a diverse, maybe literally with minority and renting and incomes, but you also just get diverse of, these are 5 different groups that elected a diverse council rather than this at-large electorate that is the only one that votes, that's the only one that's informed, kind of producing 5 cutout council members.
But they're only diverse based on
If you're too intimidated by one member, like if you perceive them as all being the same and none of them like you or from your neighborhood, then you're not going to go talk to them all.
I think the presumption is that because they're within 1 mile of you, they're going to be like you. Like, that's a huge presumption. Or they're going to have the same lived experience, the same values, the same. To Alan's point, and to the way people actually vote, they vote based on.
If you're in a district,
Chair, if I may, thank you. But people vote based on what is important to them, regardless of where they live. Now, I understand the argument that people who live within a mile of you may have certain issues in common, right? Because people within a mile don't want a power plant right there. Totally valid argument. But beyond that, the argument falls apart. Please.
This dovetails on something Brian said before was, you said, what if the person who represents you in your district, you don't agree with them? You have a much better shot of unseating them if in a smaller district election than you would as unseating somebody from an at-large seat.
But why do I have to? I'm forced to unseat them. I can't. I don't have time to. I don't want to wait 4 years to unseat them. I want to go to somebody else with my issue right now, and say, look, the person who I'm forced to talk to in my district is not listening. They just aren't. Can I please go to somebody else?
And you can't. I mean, you can. If somebody from outside your district and their interest aligns with you, you can go to that person.
But using the argument of districts, they theoretically should be less interested in my issue.
I think that's why we have a mayor, right?
They may be.
The mayor represents the entire district. So if my representative doesn't listen to me, I can go talk to the mayor.
But again, that's only one person instead of having 5 or 7.
Instead of 5 persons who doesn't listen to me at all, I think. It's better
Well,
to
I
have
mean,
one person
of course,
in my district and the mayor.
You can't guarantee
really,
perfect representation.
No, yeah.
It doesn't exist.
I understand, and just like you can't say that you're always going to have 5 people and no one's going to listen to me. But you can say that my chances are higher if I have 5 versus 1.
But the consensus that I feel from the caller and the last election, certain group of people don't feel represented at current form. And I think that's a very valid concern. So I think current system doesn't give fair representation to certain group of people. That's why we need to consider changing the system.
I rest my argument.
Everybody over here, let them talk.
So I had a question from either Rachel or Brian. So if you had a choice of someone who's a renter and someone who is a homeowner and that were running, would you vote for that renter?
If my issue aligns with that person, sure.
And what if your issue doesn't align with that person? You wouldn't, okay. So again, it comes to issues. Doesn't come to whether they're a renter or
Yes,
not. But let me also explain. From all the raw data that we got, that I kind of beat my head to it and trying to understand it. The precincts that were in the South Glendale, there was a lot of precincts that were in South Glendale. The argument that you have is there's a renter running and a homeowner running, you prefer the renter because they would represent you. Then why is it that in some of the precincts in the South Glendale, a non-renter, a homeowner was elected instead of the renter who was running at the time? And I could tell you the names too. So I looked at the names and I'm comparing going, so the renters didn't elect the renters elected the homeowner.
So you cannot talk about outcome. We can, no system can guarantee an outcome.
True, but what you're saying is then with that logic that you're saying, the renter should be voting for the renter. That the logic that you're saying that the renter should look at the renter being the only person that would represent. But I tend to agree that it's more issue-oriented as opposed to whether they're, like Paul was saying, is the issue close to me or not? Is that renter going to represent me or the person who's the homeowner? But really, the issue wasn't the homeownership or rentership. The issue was that person happened to be representing the renters better, just like, for example, Vrej or the other candidate that I was looking for. So I'm going, it's really issue-oriented. It's not something that we should concentrate, as Carl was saying, renters versus the homeowners. You should really see people that represent your ideas and put those people in power of being in the council, as opposed to really concentrating whether that person is from my area or trying to find out if these people really know what my issues are. So that's all I have to say.
If that's how we want to justify it, how can you explain the complaints that we heard from the renter who were here, like the other day, who called us, right? They're not happy with the current system.
May I bring a couple other homeowners that are not happy with, I mean, what I'm saying is, well, I personally know that our city council is not perfect. There's a lot of things that I am unhappy about for our present city council. But we're going back to real reason. I'm here to find out what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, as opposed to creating more problems because we don't think that the system is working. Then we do it because everybody else has done it. So to me, it's like, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? I've yet to be convinced that I'm solving a problem by going into districting. I really don't feel, I don't feel so.
Go for it.
To add to that, in terms of the issues, I think it's maybe how things are run versus the change of the system that's going to change things. For example, we hear people a lot of in different districts complaining about things, and then when you ask when it comes to elections, did you even vote? People don't even vote. I always have that argument with people say, if you're complaining about something or you just say, just ideas, this should change, the schools should change, the hospitals, things have to change. But when it comes to participation, people, whether it's homeowner or renter, people just don't have any say. And I'm not saying that, obviously, South and North people, we want equal representation of everybody's issues, but again, it's about people's interests, maybe how to make them be interested in different communities, because if one community in town grows or becomes better, the other one always benefits and vice versa. And people just worry about everybody's well-being instead of just their community, their street, whether they're homeowners or renters. So it's a lot of major problems versus this division of homeowners. I know so many renters and their kids who are very involved in the community. Some people who are very privileged, they don't even care about. So you can say that someone who is a homeowner, they have more privileges, and those people don't, because there's so many people in the community who come from lower economic backgrounds, but they are involved, they participate, they come, and vice versa. So I think it's much deeper than this just homeowner, renter, and even the communities. Again, there are so many people who come from very humble backgrounds, but they do much more than so many people who come from privileged backgrounds in the town, and they don't really care about it. So it must be more than what just the system is, or it's probably just overall community, just the way people work too. Because people always, I don't want to say they complain more than participate, but I think overall participation should be more encouraged, whichever the system is too. Because at the end, when people have more responsibility, everything kind of goes up. So that's what I think.
I agree with much of what Lilith just said. And I really don't accept the argument that the at-large system makes it impossible for a renter or renter's rights candidate to win a seat on the council. You know, I followed the campaign of a rental rights advocate the last two elections, and certainly there are more than enough renters to elect a rental rights candidate. And she got quite a few votes, but she didn't make it to actually win enough to be elected. But, you know, and to say that, oh, renters are disadvantaged in an at-large system, it seems to me that if they really get behind a rental rights candidate and participate and vote, they're perfectly capable of electing a rental rights candidate. I just want to point that out because it's not like no rental right candidate has ever run, but it says something that they've run but not been elected, and that comes back to turnout and who's participating. And I really don't accept the argument that, you know, a rental rights, people interested in rental rights don't vote because they don't feel they're represented. If you want to be represented, you've got to vote.
I've been pondering. At the moment, I am, again, seeing both sides. I do think that Paul's statement, you know, anyone within 1 mile, but we have several draft maps that are, the districts are much larger than 1 mile, but I think I took it as a grain of salt that you meant within a district.
In general, if you look at the maps, they're anywhere from 1 to 2 miles, and that gets you the.
From Deukmejian down to the college. Deukmejian Wilderness down to the college. That's a large.
Yeah.
That you know, that's why I said, well, that's more than 1 mile.
Okay, well,
But
I mean,
that's
an outlier. I think if you look at the other districts, it's not
that's
the
one
case.
whole district, 30,000 people in that area.
But how
approximately.
about the remaining 6?
Then you've got, let's see, the smallest district is the concentrated downtown central plan district, which would be 1 mile, but there'd be like 30,000 people in that mile.
That's right, yeah.
That's a lot. Whereas the other ones are all spread out more. I do think there is an advantage in districts in terms of getting to know your representative on the city council. That, you know, I'm going to use Paul saying, hey, this person lives within 1 mile of me, I can actually go speak with them or get in touch with them. But it really, really all depends on who is running. If the person is running, wants to be a benefit to the city of Glendale, that's what you got to focus on. And that's what the voters, when they come out, and I've worked as a poll several times and listened to people. I can't comment because I'm a poll worker, but I hear what they have to say. And, you know, they're looking for somebody who will, you know, listen to the complaints, listen to what their recommendations, when they come to council, keeping an open mind and helping. I know in my area where I live, it takes me 4 years to get something done. But I just have to keep doing it. You know, and that's the way, it's not just Glendale, it's every city. You know, to get something done, you have to just keep pressing forward. And you need people to be running for council that are willing to do that and not just say, oh, let's put this off to the next meeting, or let's put this off to the next year. You have to get people that really want to do the job. And I think that if you go to districts, you might get people more like that because they will be pressed by the people that live around them. Yeah.
When is our deadline to have some sort of consensus for the ballot? When is our like kind of deadline to have a consensus on this issue?
What's our deadline, Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so the deadline to actually put something before the voters, we'd have to have it by the end of the calendar year, but I think I had mentioned previously on this issue regarding whether to go to districts, whether to expand the council, and whether to have a directly elected mayor, if there's a proposal from the committee that is different from what the council had originally proposed, we want to be able to take that back to the council sooner rather than later. So I don't want to say now's the deadline, but we are getting to the point where and the reason for that is because if the council ultimately took that direction, there's some additional procedural steps we would need to do on our end that we really couldn't wait much longer. So we were hoping to get some direction out of this meeting, but again, if the committee's not ready, and to your point to the chair, I'm not sure there's consensus. There does seem to be some division on this issue without being divisive. There's disagreement. So
Without doing a whip count, I almost feared like we're split down the middle.
yeah, that was my sense too. So
Can I add just a couple comments? One is, I'm just going to say, when you say Glendale's punching above its weight, I agree, except I think that's a good thing. This city does an awful lot of good things with a lot less people and a lot less resources than other communities. So I think Glendale does punch above its weight. And that's not to say Glendale doesn't have challenges, because we certainly do. I used to say in my prior life, it's like when I would feel sorry for myself, I would call one of my colleagues in another city. And after about 15 minutes of talking to him, I decided I would rather work on the problems that we have here in Glendale than the problems that we have in cities. And no, it doesn't happen. It's not necessarily the really big city. Just some of the other ones. I said Glendale does a lot of weird. Second kind of comment is, I don't think our current council can be described as five of the same. So I don't know about the touchback that the at-large election system is electing five of the same, because we seem to have some diverse points of view, and people may agree or not agree, with individuals and that type of stuff. But I don't think it's producing a monolithic result. Rachel, you said something, because I think it's a really valid point. You want to be able to see people, for things to happen, but what that thing is could be very different to different people. And so if you have something that's geographic based, where you have a group that is within a particular defined area and you can draw a district, I can see that. But as I look at I think it's, I don't think it's just male, female. I don't think it's necessarily all geographic. I think people identify themselves in different ways. And so when you look at this community as diverse as it is and as integrated as it is, your constituency for a particular issue, whatever that might be, may not be geographic based. You may be looking at people that you see like you up north, out west, down south, because your issue resonates in a different way and isn't necessarily geographic based. If we were geographic based, I think we'd have a different discussion. And while I say never, because I think if circumstances were different, or we're talking about something that was geographic based, then we might be really talking about voters' rights and a need to do that. Do I have a perfect system? If I had a perfect system of government, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be very wealthy as a consultant. Have report will travel, and I think any of us would be there. But I think it's also finding what works for Glendale, not what works for a variety of other cities. We got to find what works for us. And just because something works in a neighboring city, it doesn't necessarily mean it works within the confines of Glendale and the way Glendale is built and the way Glendale interacts. But anyways, with that, I think I'll stop.
Yeah, so we mostly talked about this issue as if homeowners or renters. I've been trying to think what other examples that we can think about where people would benefit from districting. So the map that Steve was holding was kind of gave me an idea. So if you live in up north, you're surrounded by all these trees, and then there's a lot of like hillside, and there's wild animals. So issues related to tree trimmings would be much more important to you as compared to people living in the south where there's not much trees around you. So people living in certain geographic area share some common interest. So I think to that extent, not just renters and homeowners. If you live in certain area, you share same air, same trees, same environment. So the issues that affects you, it's important that those issues are represented. People living other part of the town not gonna have the same environment, it's not gonna have the same issues. So I think that's another reason why people could benefit from districting.
There are people who are going to say, no, I think that's a big issue because I go to that office.
But Chair, in that example, it's localized in terms of where it's going to be built, but it's a big issue because it's a big dollar. It's a big dollar amount. So, I mean, it's two sides to the same coin. So I don't know if that's purely a geographic issue.
But that also gets to your point of, or not, I don't know if it's your point, but somebody saying like, everybody gets to do what they want in their own district. Well, no, they don't. But, if people are making this, if everybody, because of the dollar value at stake with something like that, right? It's issue for everybody. But here's my point. If nobody lived in that area, then nobody's going to want to pay for it, even if there are people there who think it's really important and their voices being heard. It's of most important to the people who are there locally. Everybody lives in a different part of the city, and there's something that is really local to them that's very important to them that other people in the city might not be aware of. And maybe it's the new fire maps that are coming out. My whole neighborhood is now a very severe fire hazard area. A lot of the city is now, but not the whole city. But it's a big issue for some of us. It's a huge issue for some of us, and it's a local issue. And I would like to see the cities make sure that it's paying attention to issues that are very important locally. And if everybody's elected at large, there's not always a good chance that you're going to have somebody who's accountable to the people who live closest to that issue. I was a little ahead of her hand up. I thought it. No? Okay, go ahead now.
But, I don't want people to assume that, our current council makes parochial decisions, in terms of, one neighborhood versus another. I know, one example that came up recently was the issue of a drive-through In-N-Out, putting a drive-through on Pacific Avenue right at the Pacific Avenue exit from the 134, and what that would do not only to the residential, the people living in the neighborhood, but traffic in general. And, you could say, well, that's just this local, if you live around Pacific Avenue, that's just this local issue, and the rest of the council, isn't going to care. But, the council unanimously voted to have staff go back, draw up new development standards for new drive-throughs, and sort of a hybrid of new development standards and, in some cases, conditional use permits being required for something like that potential In-N-Out. But, I find that, the current council, I think, in most cases, acts in the best interest of the city as a whole, and often translates, like the In-N-Out drive-through proposal, translates a local issue into a citywide issue. And it's like, we're not just going to address this particular drive-through, we're going to look at our development standards and requirements for new drive-throughs for the whole city, so that this doesn't happen in other neighborhoods as well.
Just a few thoughts. I understand the statistics of elections, but I don't take them as they are on paper because there are certain reasons people will vote for certain people, and this is why our council is majority Armenian, because Armenians vote for Armenians typically. It's not based on what their concerns are. So if it was districted, it would be the concern over the race. And you will have much more diversity on council as well. And let's also not forget that representation also is within commissions. So the commissioners will listen to your thoughts as well and take it to council as recommendation. And the commissions, hopefully, if it's districted, will represent the district as well, rather than at large. The other thing is, the city had, well, most cities in California had major redlining issues, and our redlining issues were typically in South Glendale. And that's evident with today's disadvantaged communities as well. And unfortunately, it took a state requirement for us to start looking at this rather than the city looking at it. So it just shows that though the city probably knew South Glendale needs investment in the environment, making sure that there are no environmental vulnerabilities, it took the state to make us do it. So that shows that perhaps in general, city council does look at the city as a whole, but it also shows that they missed this part, and it's pretty major. And the other thing is, and I'm going to use this now dirty word, equity is important more than equality, because equality does not equal equity. And when you don't think about, oh, perhaps if we district, we're more equitable, I think that's a problem.
Thank you.
As an Armenian, I just want to say I don't vote for people just because they're Armenian.
And I
actually,
second that, too.
I don't, I strongly disagree with that. I vote for people who have my values. And I'm not going to say I take offense to that, but I just think that's probably, that's stereotyping people. And
I
don't-
didn't mean everyone, but I
Well-
also know people that just vote because of race.
That may be the case, but that's not what you said. But yes, people do. There are people who vote strictly on race lines, and I think that's wrong, and I don't think that's American. I don't think that's what the majority of people do.
Okay. Are we ready to take a vote on this question? Is there a motion?
I so move.
What
Would you
what
like
do you
me to-
move?
That was the first part of the sentence.
I mean, I'll happily fill in the rest, but
I will move that we increase the council to 6 districts,
So
not
go-
at large
go to-
districts.
Go to districts and with
Go to
6.
districts and have 6 districts. I'm a bit confused whether, right now, if we just go to 6 districts, it'll have to be a mayor elected at large.
we would need a we would need a 7.
And, but,
You can put that all in one motion.
okay, with a mayor at large, 6 council districts with an at-large mayor election.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table. Can we get a roll call vote?
Is there a quorum requirement? We're missing 4 members?
Quorum is, yeah, we're
2.
missing 2 members, but there's a quorum because there's
There's
7. There's a 7's quorum.
Okay.
It would be quorum, 'cause it's 4. Oh, you're right, 7. I'm thinking.
There's no math on the outside. That's what I was thinking. I know.
Roll call.
Roll call?
Committee member Durham,
No.
Flower,
Aye.
Caribbean,
Yes.
Hartunian,
No.
Karpetian,
No.
Manasarian,
No.
Megardician, Meek,
Yes?
Miller, Povolitis,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
you.
Yes.
I have that as a tie vote.
The drama.
Motion fails.
It's tied.
Okay. So, failed motion, floor still open. Is there a different motion?
I move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn is always in order. Is there a second? Okay, good. Motion fails for lack of a second. Okay, so before we get to that, then let me just say there are a few other items on this agenda, aren't there? Or is that it?
Future items.
But let's just take a moment, and I would be okay with carrying it one more time or not,
Carrying this item over?
because we have two members who are
Yeah,
missing.
I was going to say,
mean,
that's an option. Certainly, if the committee wants to have, come back next time to have the other two members weigh in and see if it changes the outcome, that's certainly an option.
I think I was going to suggest maybe they are watching or they'll have a time to watch and discuss and think, maybe in the beginning of next meeting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, my request to my fellow committee members is that we come back next time, make sure that our missing members are given the floor to speak and ask questions and the way we've been doing tonight, but that we come ready with our reasons, but an open mind, but our reasons, and really spend the time between now and then thinking about this issue and prepared to vote. I really appreciate that everybody's been open and discussing this in good faith. It's fantastic, but there is a time to get off the pot, so to speak. So,
Quick question, so next meeting, I won't be here, so then if you guys, if some of us are missing, what's gonna happen?
I don't know, I guess maybe if I can, just propose an alternative. It's like, I don't know that whether next meeting, we are where we are with a tie vote, and I think there's been a lot of good discussion. But that doesn't mean we got to make a decision next meeting, and we got two members, and we're going to have another member absent. And I think this one's important enough to try to bring everybody together. We've got other things on the agenda that we need to work with and work on, that maybe we start putting those on the agenda, and maybe we can kind of work with the staff to kind of get a sense of when
to that,
everybody's
or-
here, and then bring it back when
Special
everybody's
meeting?
here.
A couple items, a couple options. One is to do a special meeting at some point. To Vice Chair Povlitis' point, one of the discussion items is on council compensation. That's a really finite discussion that can probably be had at one meeting, and that isn't impacted by this necessarily. So, if you want, we can bring that back at the next meeting, or we can see about scheduling a special meeting between now and the next meeting in May, or after the May meeting, we have a special meeting if we want that, if that's a possibility.
yeah, I just want to be respectful of the staff and the council's time, that the things that they need to do, if there is a recommendation to go forward, well, one or the other. And so, if everybody could be responsive when somebody reaches out about the possibility of a special meeting, so if we can decide that that's the way to go, we can schedule it as quickly as possible.
Does she have a right to reserve her vote?
Unfortunately,
Nope.
she
No
would have
proxy
to-
vote.
No proxy voting, she'd have to be here. So and that's the thing, what we would do is we would go and, we have to see availability for rooms and TV to get some possible dates, then we'll send them out to the committee to see if that's a possibility. We could just limit it to that discussion about this issue.
Yeah.
And then just basically, like you said, have the two commissioners who are not, committee members who are not here, be able to address the committee and give their thoughts, and then we can continue the discussion.
Obviously, we're clearly divided on this, and everybody's being reasonable. So I want everybody to be able to weigh in on this. If it's going to be a divided vote, I want to be respectful of everybody's ability to partake in that vote.
What happens if we end up divided because we're an
Well,
even number?
I mean, we have an even number. I don't know why they did that. This is why you need an odd number of people on the council. Then there's just no recommendation on the issue.
Right.
That's what goes forward. No recommendation.
Although I would note, we would obviously
Yeah.
note to the
Sure.
council, if it stayed tied, that it was, like you said, a robust discussion. It was tied, and, we would provide all that information to the council. And certainly, when we present that to the council, we're going to invite all of you who want to come come and
And that
explain
also
everything.
shows from
Correct.
all these people that this is a subject that is still
Sure.
everybody cares about, but it's hard to decide. So that's another sign for them too, meaning information going forward that this is what it
Right.
is, the situation.
And all the more important that everybody who's taken the
Yes.
time to join us
Yes.
in this committee is represented in that
Chair, if I may.
non-decision.
Can we basically wrap it up and say it was a tie and we require the council to watch this video and move on? Because, I mean, honestly, because.
I don't think we can require them to do anything.
Well,
but-
I mean,
I would agree.
I'm sort of tongue in cheek, but I'm actually, there is some seriousness to what I'm getting at, only because there's so many other things we need to get to. And I kind of feel we've covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of information here. In the end, even if we had a recommendation one way or the other, it still is really just.
The fact that it's divided is the information.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So I think we've come to the point where there is sufficient information. The information gathering has happened. And can I make a motion that we wrap it up, that it's clear that it's divided and we're done and we can move on to the next thing? I mean, I guess I can make that motion, right? I mean, it just requires a second and a vote.
I'm just trying to think about how that's actually framed. What
Well,
would
I
you
would
call
say
that?
you had a tie vote, right? So there's no recommendation, as you noted. Perhaps it's just a motion to advise the council that the
Watch the
council.
video.
Well, we would summarize for them what
Sure.
what the discussion was and encourage them to watch the video if they wanted. But present that information to them, and then that could be your motion.
I would like to give us one more chance at a vote with a full complement of committee members. And I hear you. I want to move on to other things. That's what but that's why I'm saying I really want, if there needs to be a special meeting, that we're all there. If we're not all there, I kind of don't want to have a special meeting for this issue.
And what's driving my comment is ultimately this is all advisory, right? So it's.
I'm not trying to keep this going so that I can win this argument. No, honestly, this is about each and every person here and making sure that they've had a chance to get their vote recorded on this.
Well, I mean, they have had their chance. Everybody has had their chance.
We never called a vote on this before.
Before today.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So,
I don't want it to be a very long discussion. I really not retread everything. I want the people who aren't here, who have been here at the other discussions, to have a chance to say.
Then let's go home and have dinner, I guess.
quick question. So, like, whatever we recommend, it goes to council, right? And then they decide whether the issue the districting is gonna put on the ballot or not. They decide. Is that the process?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And we're just like recommending. They are free to like reject our recommendation and do whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, yes.
Always have been.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome to being on a city committee. So with that, we will table it one more time. And that is our future agenda for moving on to item 8.
Chair, we have one request to speak for item 8,
For business.
future agenda.
Okay,
Before we get there,
Okay.
question, if we cannot or get a special meeting between now and the next meeting in May, do we bring it back in May, or do you want us at that point to just go forward and present the information that it was a tie vote among the committee? I'm asking all of you that.
Yeah, it's tough enough to set this schedule. If we're going to do any special meetings, I'd request it way in advance.
Yeah, we would.
Like 2 months out, so that we can try to figure it out, which doesn't really solve our problem.
Right.
So I would lean towards just that. Here's the report. It was a tie. Watch the tape. And, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to come to your own conclusions anyways. Hopefully, we've brought new angles to the debate where they'll genuinely consider it. I watched all that. None of these things, I should say, a lot of these things did not come up in council discussion. Many of these things did, but a lot of things didn't. So I really would like to have them sit in a room and watch the tape. Yeah. Or put it on a reel. Make them watch a reel. Maybe they can watch 2 minutes worth of something. Yeah.
And I would just say maybe the other option is we just bring it back in May, but limit the debate to just the two well, no, I'm sorry, Ms. Yu can't be here. So
Can we think about this after the meeting?
Sure.
And see what we can come up with?
we'll work towards a special meeting, and if we can't do it, we'll advise the committee, and then we can, at that point, just provide the summary of the action for the city council.
All right. Item 8, future agendas. Public comment, does the person in the public comment want to hear what staff has to say about this before you speak?
A future agenda, I think, like as I mentioned, we plan to this as well as assuming this salary discussion, council compensation.
Could I also request that we look at the contribution limits as an item?
We can put together what I would suggest is we would put together for the committee what we have on our books right now, as well as state law, provide that information to you, and then yeah, you can certainly have a discussion whether or not you want to recommend that be part of the charter.
I just think it's germane to everything that's going on.
Yeah. We'll work towards that. No, that's it.
All right. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the item 8 future agendas?
Members of the Charter Committee, my name is Herbert Molano. I would like to suggest as a future agenda item an initiative that was taken by the cities of Portland, Oregon, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it is called a Model City Charter example, which is an equity-focused measure. So in the event that you don't have districts, there's nothing to stop you from embedding into the charter a way in which the city must report on a regular basis on their equity-focused efforts, something that you might want to consider, to embed it in the charter instead of having an election for that process, because that's what the city needs. We recognize that there are equity problems with the way the distribution of funds in the city and the attention of the city is being given. And this might be a way. They don't have it in the charter, but they have incorporated a measure of this type so that they can report on that. This is something that you might want to consider as an alternative. Kind of define districts and then you measure against it, but you don't necessarily have elections by district. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Mr. Meek, do you want to comment on future agenda?
No.
Or are you going to make a motion to adjourn? Was that?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.